Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is where you're at. This is Tom Connors coming to you from Midnight's Edge. With me today is a very special guest, Mr. Kamran Pasha. How you doing?
I'm well, Tom. It's great. It's great to be on. I've been a big fan of the channel for a very long time, so it's really delightful. And I don't know if Andre's going to join us today, but he's been a great voice, and so I'm just delighted to be here.
He's going to try. You never know. Script Doctor or Rob may show up. But in the meantime, you're the focal point anyway, so that's all that matters. I know we've done a few podcasts together, but this is the first time we've really got to talk to you one-on-one here on the channel. Yeah. So we're going to open up the questions, of course, to you guys out there in the audience. We got a few things we want to talk about ahead of time. Of course, before we get too deep into the discussion, as people are filing in, why don't you give them a little heads up on who you are, what you've done in the industry, where you come from, all that kind of stuff, just in case they haven't seen you yet before on any of these podcasts.
Sure, excellent. So yeah, my name is Kamran Pasha. I'm a filmmaker, screenwriter, director in Hollywood. I've been working there for 19 years. I've done a lot of television. So I've worked on shows. I started my career off on the original reboot of the Twilight Zone back about 20 years ago with Forrest Whitaker on UPN. The big show that got me a lot of attention in the industry was a show called Sleeper Cell on Showtime, which was about a Muslim FBI agent who infiltrates Al-Qaeda. And, being one of the very few Muslims in Hollywood, it sort of allowed me to talk a little bit about my own traditions and community in a way that hadn't really been seen before in Hollywood. I've worked on genre shows. I've worked on Bionic Woman, the reboot of that on NBC. I've worked on Nikita on the CW, done some historical stuff. I worked on Rain. I actually love historical epics. That's what I write privately. I write these huge historical epics, but they can be challenging to get made sometimes. So I'm still working on several of them. But yeah, so I most recently I was working on the CW's Roswell, New Mexico, and I've done some shows that never aired, including a great project with Oliver Stone of Guantanamo Bay, which I can talk about, which never got on the air because we got trapped in the Harvey Weinstein craziness. So I got lots of stories.
Great. But of course, some of you out there who are watching may know Kamran for most recently making some noise about his knowledge in the world of Star Wars and Lucasfilm. Because you talked to Jeremy and you've been on everything from Friday Night Tights to the High Council, correct?
Yeah. The only one place I haven't been on is the Dark Council. I keep teasing my brother Abu Nas because the Dark Council is full of all these white dudes. Last time it was all these Australian dudes. I was like, I'm a brown dude. Why am I not on the Dark Council? So I'm gonna keep teasing them until they put me on. So God bless.
But yeah, so you've had a lot of years behind you in the industry here. Like you said, you worked on the original remake of The Twilight Zone, not the most recent one, to be clear, but the one from the 80s, like you said, or was it early 90s?
The second remake. There was one in the 80s, kid.
So it'd be the second one, yeah.
Yeah, the second one. So now we have a third iteration that's out there, so yeah.
But yeah, so you started there. Tell us how you got involved with Disney or Lucasfilm, where that kind of came along.
Well, I actually worked for Disney about 10 years ago. I was hired to be the head writer for the TRON animated series, TRON Uprising, which was linked to the TRON sequel movie that had come out. It was essentially a prequel to that story, sort of in between the original movie and the second movie. And it was a story of how the grid essentially became taken over by Clue and the rebellion that had begun that was then shown in the second movie. So I came on to write the animated show for that. Very proud of that show. It only went one season. There's a lot of fans. I still, a decade later, get emails from people saying how much they love that show and hoping it can be resurrected. And as I've said on other podcasts, I'm very open about it. I got fired from the show. Because I didn't like the way some of how it was being handled within Disney and the process. And I'm not a very politically savvy guy. I'm a straightforward guy. I'm a straight shooter. And so I just went straight to the executives and said, look, we have this bottleneck. We have these problems. These people are getting in the way of getting it done. Can we talk to these people and just either they start facilitating the process or get out of the way of the process? And, I discovered quickly that that's not how you do things at Disney. You don't actually challenge people. You go around them. You stab them in the back. You spread rumors. You don't actually direct people. That's something that the funny thing is when I joined Disney, my lawyer, who I've been with for over 20 years, my lawyer said to me, you got to be careful over there. He said, you got to be careful over there. He said, these are not nice people, as in Disney, the institution. And I've worked at Warner Brothers, I worked at Paramount, I worked all over the place, right? And I've worked at Universal. Like, how can it be any different from the standard, like, Machiavellian nature of Hollywood? He's like, nah, you'll see. And I did see. And the moment I confronted the system and I said, okay, we have this problem and we need to talk to this person and facilitate it, I was out the next day. I was like, okay, well, there goes that, right? And so, but I'm not going to change. I prefer to be a straightforward guy because I think, that's the way to get things done. And this kind of complex maneuvering I can do it. It's just a bore and a waste of time. I'd rather be creating material. But as you can see, that complex maneuvering continued on for many years. Even now is going on behind the scenes at Disney as they're trying to figure out what to do with Lucasfilm and with Kathleen Kennedy, which I've talked about very openly. And so, yeah, the culture hasn't changed in any way since I was there.
Right. We already got a question coming from Jaegerbaum who sent $5. Says, question, Cameron. How often do producers and directors listen to advisors? I think he means listen to advisors. They hear on subject
matters.
Yeah, they hear on subject matters they're experts in. Tron Uprising was awesome. What's your answer to that? Do you think they actually listen to their advisors or no?
Well, it of course depends on the individual show and the nature of the advice that they're being given, right? I mean, if they literally don't know what they're talking about how to do some major stunt event, they're going to listen to the people to do it, right? But when it comes to things that are related to politics, ideology, in my experience, a lot of people tend to just have advisors there for PR purposes. They're there to say, we've got this person that can tell us about XYZ culture that we're talking about, so don't criticize us and don't claim that we're racist or whatever that you want to do. And then often they'll just ignore them. And I've been through that on shows, being a Muslim guy, and I've written on several shows that have Muslim themes or characters will show up in an episode. And often, advisors are brought in, but, they're all, if what the advice is not what politically the boss wants to do, it's often ignored. And that's just reality of human nature.
Right. And like, I know, I'm sure from a writer's perspective, writers are kind of probably ignored until they're needed, I'm sure. When you get to the production process, yeah,
that's often true in features. It's not necessarily true in television, which is where I've done most of my work. Television, thankfully, still has writers as the dominant force because in movies, it's the directors that really push things forward. You write a script as a writer, then the director takes it from you, and then often you're not even allowed on set. I mean, you're just cut out of the process because the director wants to put their vision on it because it's going to be a one-off. It's this movie. And they don't want the writer there sort of overshadowing their vision. In television, you've got to create multiple episodes. It used to be 22 episodes. Now the orders are down to 6 or 10, right? But still, you have to have an arc for several episodes, and the directors come and go, and the writers are the ones that are there. So in television, writers tend to have a lot of power. Despite our own effort, writers tend to be very self-sabotaging, and we've recently done a lot of things with the Writers Guild that have, in my view, sabotaged the power of writers. But we're still there, and we're still largely influential.
Right. And I guess we maybe shadow banned or the alert didn't go out to everybody. So if you guys want to share this out just to let everybody know we're live, that'd be great. There was a quick question here I'm going to grab. Vinzinger, if I'm saying that right, G, says, another question for Cameron. Have you ever considered being a guest for Joe Rogan's podcast? I figured that was a quick question to ask.
Sure. I mean, I'd love to be on Mr. Rogan's podcast. It's very popular. I think he has a lot of interesting things to say. I don't think he knows who I am. So if anybody knows him, wants to put a recommendation, I do know a friend of mine tweeted to Joe a couple of weeks ago, man, you got to get this guy on your show. And I don't think Joe noticed it. So, this is the thing in Hollywood is, you're surrounded by constant PR and fame and attention, and most writers tend to not have that unless you get to a place like David Benioff and D.B. Weiss got to with the Game of Thrones, where they became celebrities at least for a while, and then they discovered a celebrity has a cost, and people then directly attack you when they're not happy with what you're doing. So, despite my great ego, most people don't know who the hell I am, and so God bless them.
Yeah. So, there was some pretty big news today, actually. Why don't we talk about this right off the top? Yeah. There was this law that's been in place for probably close to 100 years, I think it is now.
It's about like 70 years. I think
70 years, somewhere in there, where basically studios cannot own a theater chain. And for very good reason. I mean, we could get into that a little bit here, but that law was ostensibly reversed today. And that was the big news that dropped this morning. Tell us how that affects everything going forward from your point of view and your perspective.
it's interesting because just before I came onto this this video cast, I was on a writers chat board with some very prominent writers, all discussing this, and people are concerned. So the background of this is that back in the 50s, the State Department, the Justice Department, essentially put out a what's called a consent decree, where they got the major studios of the time, which included Warner Brothers, included studios that no longer exist, but the major studios of the time, to say, look, because they were being accused of violating antitrust and being a monopoly, which they were. The studios owned the movie theaters as well. And so as a result, they controlled the entire distribution process and were very dominant. And people were concerned that they were now, that they had become this unstoppable monopoly and an oligopoly, essentially. And so the U.S. government forced the studios to divest themselves of the theaters back in the 50s, and that actually ended the old studio system that we know. All the classic movies, Casablanca, and all those were built under that studio system, and they made some wonderful movies. And I would argue the stories were better then than they are today. But there was a cost to that, which is that essentially all of us were slaves to the system. The sort of global evil conglomerate that people accuse Disney of being was the entire system. Actors were controlled by it, and writers, and so. Everyone was a work for hire for that system because they controlled everything. They controlled, the entire distribution process. That was eliminated, and that allowed the rise of the writers' union and all of that. People started becoming more independent, and with the last few years, with the rise of Netflix and the streamers, suddenly you had a situation where you had these online streaming companies like Netflix that were doing what used to be done in the old days, which is they pay for the content and then they distribute it on their own system. They're not distributing necessarily to theaters. And so because of that, the studios were like, look, man, we're losing out. We're losing out to competitors. We'd love to be able to buy theaters and be able to funnel our product to them and control what the theaters show, which is what our competitor gets to do. And today, the federal judge ruled that the studios really were being unfairly treated in this current economic environment where the system has changed so rapidly with streaming. And so they removed the consent decree, which, my entire career has been under that consent decree. The only place that consent decree really didn't apply to was Disney, because Disney did not essentially become the studio we know today until after that consent decree. But they kept quiet. Disney owns a lot of major theaters in LA, including the El Capitan, famous tourist places, right, in Los Angeles. But they keep it really quiet, and they don't.
Right, they just can't own a chain is kind of the whole deal. Yeah,
exactly. But now they can. Now everyone can. And on one level, it's going to save theaters, so that's a good thing, right? Because theaters are dying right now because of the lockdowns and the rules that have been instituted, and AMC and all these other theaters are in serious trouble of ceasing to exist. And I'm a huge theater buff. I would prefer to see a movie in a theater than on my laptop or on my TV. And so it is good that now they'll have cash infusions into theaters and potentially save the theater industry. The bad thing is we're going back to the monopoly oligopoly situation here. And, I'm very critical of some of the choices Bill Clinton made during his presidential time, where he essentially took off a lot of the restrictions on media conglomerates that allowed them to essentially become monopolies. Now we have 6 major corporations that control all the media in the United States and much of the world. And I don't think that's healthy. And I think we're seeing the results of that in society right now, and the people being unhappy with the information they're being given and resisting it. And I think that's going to happen again in Hollywood. So there's a dark side to that that's going to play out.
Yeah, that's and another thing is, especially now in this environment where basically you've got 3 big hitters, and that is Warner, Universal, and Disney, of course. The other people are not going to be able to compete. They're not going to be able to buy theaters. I mean, Lionsgate, MGM, they're all going to have to make deals through the other studios, and it's going to get messy. And that's kind of one of the other reasons the law was in place, is so, one theater couldn't say, well, we're not going to play a Warner picture here. This is a Disney theater. Yeah. And they can also gouge the prices. They can also, there's all kinds of, and not every city is going to be able to sustain 3 or 4 different theaters showing every studio's different features, as it was a little bit different when that law was in place. They actually could, because there wasn't television stations so much, and cable wasn't a thing yet. It was still 20 years off when this law was put into place. There was a lot of different things in the nature, and I get where there is a part of it there that makes sense, but the other side of it, it's scary, because it puts all the control in the hands of the studios now. Yeah, and they could do.
They're already powerful. I mean, they're already
right. Yeah.
Powerful, right? I mean, I deal with them. I mean, and it's just and now they're going to go back to the power they had. I mean, back in the old days, the joke is this, that in the old days of old Hollywood, the studio heads could have you killed openly. Now they have you killed quietly, right? Before, everyone in the cops were like, oh yeah, the boss.
Well, either way, they still control the media. Yeah.
Now you got to hire like a quiet assassin to take care of somebody, but you can't have the cops take care of it for you publicly like they used to in the film.
But yeah, that's a very a big can of worms. Actually, probably quite a few cans of worms that could probably take a whole podcast to discuss. So I don't want to dwell on it too long.
Hollywood, I'm not totally joking there.
Well, no, I mean the whole thing with the theater law too. I mean, but yeah, no, I mean, like that's something we could talk about for a good hour and a half just by itself. But there's some great questions here I wanted to get to real quick, like this one.
Very nice one on the screen there. Yeah.
Charles Sullivan asks, "Is there an age when it is too late to try and start a career in television writing? I'm 47 and retired from my old career. I'd like to write for TV, but I'm worried." He didn't finish, but I'm assuming he's saying I'm too old or what have you. I think that's a very poignant question, like, because you think as a writer, what do you really need other than an idea and a typewriter or a pen and paper or a computer or whatever to put your idea down on? Really, that's all that matters.
Absolutely. Well, look, I'm 48. And I came into this industry when I was 29, so I've been doing this for 19 years. And I know people that came here right out of high school. They didn't go to college. They've just been working here since they were 16, 17 years old. I will say this: you can and should follow your dreams at any stage in your life, right? I've always wanted to be a songwriter. This year at 48, I started taking songwriting lessons, and I started learning how to play the keyboard. And whether that ever becomes something I can do professionally, I don't know. But I'm going to keep working to master that so that I can actually add music into my professional thing. It might take me 20 years. I might be an old man before I do it. So you should, because as Tom said, you can just get a book on screenwriting, and I'll recommend in a moment some books on screenwriting for anyone in the chat that wants them. You should get a book on screenwriting, learn. I became a professional screenwriter I did go to film school later, but I sold my first scripts from reading a book and learning how to do it. And I wrote a script based on this book says how you write it. And I sold my first scripts to Paramount doing that. And so you can write a script anytime. And the fact that you have all this life experience will hopefully be helpful in a more mature script than a lot of 19-year-olds will come up with. Now, the one thing you have to be aware of is that Hollywood is very ageist. So, the challenge is you could write a brilliant script that gets people's attention, and then they meet you and they go, you're old, you're in your 40s, late 40s, right? But you can overcome that by showing that you have a consistent and interesting voice. And, don't give up on your dreams. In fact, follow them. You don't know what will happen. You will be surprised at the doors that can open. And so the book that I would recommend for you and anyone in the chat is the book that I read to become a screenwriter, which is still one of the most popular books. It's called The Screenwriter's Bible by David Trottier, Trottier. You can buy it hopefully from your local bookstore, but you can also buy it on Amazon and BarnesNoble.com. But read that book. It'll teach you everything from how to format the script to basic story structure. And I read that, and I became a professional writer in the Writers Guild from scripts I wrote having just read that. Just do it. You have no idea what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, that's it.
And if you never know, you could. The worst that's going to happen is some people are going to tell you no.
Yeah.
And then eventually,
you'll get to write something you enjoy. The writing itself is not fun. The end process of having a script you like is fun.
Yeah, well, and then there's two other avenues. You could always turn it into a book or a novel or something like that. And I'm sure this has happened to you many times, as I've heard from Script Doctor and other writers that I've known in the business. Mm-hmm. They may be like, well, I'm not interested in this, but I think you'd be good for this. And they already have another project they're working on that could be your foot in the door. Like, it may not necessarily be their cup of tea to make what you have in mind, but it could be your avenue to other work. And then eventually that other thing could get made. And, but I mean, again, I'm sure that's something you've experienced yourself in this business.
I directly experienced that. The very first script that I wrote, the one that I wrote from reading this book, was a teen horror movie that, there was a good movie in last year. Remember Insidious? That was out,
Yes.
Right. And so it was that interesting. I wrote this script 20 years ago. It was essentially Insidious. It was about astral projection and the evil entity entering the guy's body, and that's Insidious. So I wrote this horror script 20 years ago about astral projection, and that never got made. And Insidious, a really wonderful version of that, did get made many years later. But that script got me my first agent, who then got me in front of the producers that then I pitched some ideas to, and they liked them, and I wrote those. and I sold those to Paramount. So that script never got made, but it set my career moving. And I've got lots of scripts that to this day are pure writing samples. To this day, I get work off of scripts that have never been made, but people are like, man, you really know how to write. I want you on this one. That's good.
There you go. And we got another question here. Resurrected Starship sends in $5, says, I love Tron Uprising. Why was it canceled? And what is the state of the Tron franchise? Excuse me. Do you think it will ever come back in any medium? Now, it was recently in the news, just recently. I don't know if you can comment on that at all. And of course, as you said in the opening, you got fired from the show, so I don't know how much you know about what happened after you left.
But I heard what happened. I have my own. But yeah, but let me answer the second part. I do think it will come back. I think it's an important franchise. I think Disney was disappointed that the first movie did not do as well as they expected, and they were certainly disappointed that the cartoon did not get more one season. And we'll talk about that because I was there. But I think it's an important franchise, and they want to bring it back. So you've been hearing talk about the developing. I've been hearing them developing a new Tron for a while. There was going to be a sequel to the Tron, second Tron film with the same actors, including Olivia Wilde. I think was being considered. I think that's dead. I'm sure Olivia's off done wonderful things. I think they're going to go on to some other version of Tron in that universe without those actors and characters. But I do believe, and I've consistently hear that it's in development and it's serious. They want to figure it out. And so I do believe it'll come back. Now, what happened on the show is, now keep in mind, I'm biased. I threw my heart into the show. I got fired from the show. So the show changed in tone. I wanted to make, and I think those of you who've seen it will recognize, at least in the first half of the show, I wanted to make something like the Batman animated show, which is a very sophisticated adult show that children would enjoy. And I think we achieved that in the first half of Tron. When I was let go, it changed in tone. New writers were brought in who were more willing to go along with the things that were happening there, and they changed it into a very child oriented show, and it became a very different tone in the second half. And I think a lot of the audience that loved the show started falling off from that. I think that they were surprised by the tonal change, and so the ratings fell, which is, the day that I was fired and I was brought into the big meeting of, you're going to be fired, right? I said to the executives, I said, okay, that's fine. I'll leave. I'll pack up my box and go. But I want to say a couple of things here. One is that if you don't adjust, if you don't fix these problems in the process that I tried to adjust, they're only going to get worse, and it's going to delay your animation. Our animation coming out of Asia, and it's going to add massive cost overruns to where this is going to go. And it's not going to be profitable for you to do the show. If for political reasons you won't talk to those people who are creating the problem, then you're just going to end up having a loss on the show, number one. And number two is, if you change the tone of the show, I think you're going to lose your audience. Because that was one of the reasons they said, we got to let you go. We think you're not making the show we want. It's really for adults. It's not for kids. I said, okay, I don't think that's what we discussed when I was hired, but that's what you're saying to let me go. Fine. But if you want to go that direction, I don't think it's going to achieve your objective. And I don't think the show is going to last more than one season. And they said, thank you very much. Pack up your stuff. Go. I did. Exactly how it played out. Disney, again, it was more important that all the executives preserve their political relationships than the success of the show. And the show died.
All right. Well, hopefully that answers Resurrected Starship's question there. Another great question here.
Politics in Star Wars. I mean, that's the culture of Disney. It is a very difficult place, even by Hollywood standards, for Machiavellian politics.
We got some great questions coming up here in Super Chats, but I saw this one real quick. I wanted to ask on behalf of Dirty Soul Monkey. It says, hi, Cameron. How was writing on Bionic Woman? Did you go in fresh, or did you research the old shows before working on it? Like, were you a fan ahead of time, or?
Well, Bionic Woman was one of my favorite shows as a kid. I had immigrated from Pakistan when I was 3 years old. So I learned how to speak English from watching Magilla Gorilla, Gilligan's Island, and Bionic Woman, right? And so
there you go.
I learned as a kid to watching these TV shows taught me English, right? And I love, I had a huge crush on Lindsay Wagner, right? When I was a producer on the show, I kept saying, we got to find a way to get Lindsay Wagner on the show. I was like, I wanted to meet with Lindsay Wagner, right? And for
That's cool.
And for it never quite worked out. And I think Lindsay had a lot of criticisms of the show. I think that was a problem. I think she had come out pretty publicly saying, I don't like where this new show is going. So they didn't want to involve her, right? God bless her. She wasn't wrong. I was a fan of the show. The show itself, for those who watched it, there were a lot of tonal, similar to what happened with with Tron, there were a lot of tonal shifts. But the difference with Tron is the tonal shift happened halfway into the show when I was fired and it became a different show. This was happening episode by episode. Like one episode would be this intense drama, second episode would be a comedy, and so people were like, "What the hell is this show?" Right? And that was because, again, the politics of NBC at the time, we had essentially 3 showrunners, each of them wonderful people, each of them I hope to be able to work with again. But each of them had a different vision for the show. One of them had come up with the idea of adapting the old Bionic Woman, and he was David Icke, who had with Ron Moore had created the new Battlestar Galactica. So he had been very successful for them with that, and so he had come in with the success of Galactica, saying let's redo it. At the time, he was not a writer; he was a non-writing producer. He's become a writer since then, and so they're like, well, we're not going to let you run this show. So thank you for bringing this idea. You'll be one of the showrunners. Let's bring on somebody who's going to write the pilot. So they brought on Jason Smilovic and later Colagritis. They wrote the pilot, and later fell out of the process. And then Jason became the sort of the guy who had the final pilot that was written, even though I think Leda got the full credit for it. And so Jason would be one of the showrunners, because he had written the pilot, but he had never run a TV show, so he couldn't be the guy in charge either. So then they brought Glenn Geller, who was in the X-Files. And so Glenn came on, and he was a brilliant showrunner, and he had very strong opinions how to do things. He had run the X-Files for 5 years, right? And so now you had these 3 different people, each of them invested in thinking, well, it's my show. So each of them would every day sort of push the show in the direction they wanted. So that was the problem. You didn't really have one person in charge, and that created the outcome that we saw, which is that ultimately the show did not succeed, even though we had Michelle Ryan is a great actress. We had Katie Sackhoff from as the evil Bionic Woman from Battlestar Galactica, and I love Katie Sackhoff, and she is an incredible actor. So it's one of those things where it's, again, because Hollywood, the way especially network television is a lot of cooks in the kitchen, right? And that's the process sometimes, and it doesn't always work.
Yeah, a television show much different than a feature for sure. In Hot Water sends in $2, has a fun question. Is Caddyshack 2 the worst sequel of all time? No, that is incorrect. The answer is The Last Jedi. No, I don't know. What would you say the worst sequel of all time is?
I mean, I would say it's The Last Jedi, but then I think the entire sequel trilogy of Disney is the worst sequel of all time. So I don't even consider that to be canon. I think that's bad fan fiction that was financed by crazy rich people.
As bad as Caddyshack 2 is, there's much worse out there. Like, I mean, that film has a lot less sins than a lot of sequels do, I guess.
I mean, it's like this. Like, so people rag on Superman 3 and 4 and whatever, but at the end of the day, they still, I don't think they're great movies, but they still part of. They still saw themselves as honoring Superman, even if they didn't have great scripts and whatever. Right?
Yeah. I long for the days when Superman 3 or Caddyshack 2 were the worst of the movies we got. That's for sure.
Whereas with the new Disney trilogy, it was an ideological agenda to mess over the original slate. Mm-hmm. You can have a badly written movie, but still in heart wants to be like it's mommy, right? That came from, and you can have a rebellious kid who wants to kill mommy, and that's the Disney trilogy.
That's a very good, sad, scary analogy. I'm going to probably butcher this name, and I'm apologizing, Michael, but Michael Deitch, I think is what it's pronounced as. $5 says, how will the pandemic hits to the industry affect screenwriters? Well, how has it affected you so far, and how do you think it's going to affect you guys going forward in that domain?
Well, I mean, I was hit very personally. I had a major project that was a pilot. Huge epic pilot set in the Mughal Empire that was based on a script I'd written for, and that I sold to Warner Bros. About the Taj Mahal, building the Taj Mahal years ago. So it was going to be an epic sort of Game of Thrones thing about the Mughals and the royal family of the Mughal court. And that had been a done deal. I was about to write the pilot, for a lot of money, enough money that would have gotten me through this pandemic, right? And in April, the day literally they were supposed to pay me, they pulled the plug on the whole project. So it affected me very deeply. Wow. I went from having a 6-figure guaranteed income to, okay, I'm going to pay next month's rent. I mean, literally, I was exaggerating. It was like, okay, that project is dead. I got nothing else lined up. The sound just shot down. I thought we had a contract. I mean, that's not my gig. You don't see. So, but that's it happened to a lot of people. A lot of people had projects pulled. The good thing is because we're screenwriters, we can write from home. And so a lot of people screenwriters continued to work, whereas actors and the crew could not work, right? Because there was nothing filming. That has slowly begun to change. Slowly, filming has started up in the last few weeks, last few days. They're very terrified of this situation, and part of it is also it's an interesting political thing because, and again, no one will say this publicly because publicly everyone has to to follow the official line, which is there is a horrible pandemic, and whatever the government tells us, we have to obey. And if they tell us to stay in our homes for the rest of our lives, we're going to do it. That's the official line everyone in Hollywood has to say, right? Or they are blacklisted essentially because they're like, oh, are you trying to get people killed? Are you trying to get them sick? So everyone has to say this privately. Privately, I've had a lot of my actor friends going, man, I'll sign a release. I just want to get back to work. I won't sue you if I get the stupid virus, right? I just want to get back to work. I've had crews say that. And so that's the political dynamic we're facing right now in the industry, where the official representatives of the actors and the crew and the writers, the guilds and the unions are officially all like, oh, we can't go back to work. We can't go back to work unless we have all these restrictions, some restrictions which make filming impossible, such as, you can only have a scene in a TV show or movie with two people that are separated by this much distance, and you can not have CGI lovemaking. I mean,
that's crazy talk, but yeah.
Everyone is saying this crap. Nobody wants to do this crap, but nobody wants to say out loud they don't want to do this, right? I'm saying it, I don't care. I say everything, right? Nobody cares about it.
Right.
But that's the truth. Is people are like, I don't want to do any of this, but they don't want to say it because they're afraid of social rejection. Anyone who follows my Twitter feed is I've questioned a lot of the rules. I don't question the existence of a virus. I question a lot of the rules that our governments have placed upon us, and I'm very open about questioning that. I'm very much in the minority in Hollywood for openly questioning it. I mean, people are terrified more of being socially rejected by questioning what's happening than they are of the virus itself. And so I'm the only one who's like, maybe lockdown wasn't the best approach. Maybe Sweden had a better approach. No one in the industry is saying that except me. Because, they'll think you're a totally whack job who wants to kill people. Anyone who sees in the background, my mom's walking around. I live with my mom. I take care of her. She's 77 years old. I don't want her to get sick. I don't want to get this virus. I'm also intelligent enough to know that maybe not all the information we're getting is being properly understood. Can't say that in the industry.
Well, not only that, anybody but pretty much actors can wear protective masks and gloves and other things anyway. So again, except for the actors, it's getting to a point where I'm sure a lot of people are getting antsy. And
yeah, but that's the thing is, if we can't put two actors in a love scene, we can't have a love scene, then there's no filming. And
I know, and it's getting ridiculous, and it's kind of a do or don't kind of situation here at this point. What's
going to happen is this, and I've said this, again, no one will say this publicly. I've said this, and I've said this to other people in the industry. I was like, everyone's just going to disobey these rules. They're going to come up with all these rules that will make it impossible to film, and they'll go along with it for 1 week while various unions will send their representatives on the set to make sure they're being obeyed. And the moment the union reps leave, everyone's just going to go back to filming the way they normally do, right? Because they just have to. And but you can't say it out loud.
Well, I think the main thing is they'll have to do a lot of testing on actors, like on a normal basis, and it'll be kind of uncomfortable for a while, I'm sure, but it'll be something that'll have to happen eventually once things start rolling and getting back into motion. So,
I'm going to say the most forbidden thing in Hollywood to say: the moment the election is over, whoever wins, they're just going to get back to business. I mean, I think a lot of people are pushing this for.
You're probably right.
They just won't say that out loud. I'm like, well, I'm pretty open about that. I know you're doing it. You don't say that to me privately, but you're not saying it publicly. So whatever, fine.
Culture Casino sends us a super sticker. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. Tiberius Monk 84 sends in a $5 question. Says, name a TV or movie that failed but had an idea that with a talented cast and crew could succeed. Have a good day, he says to both of us. So a show that failed, I'm assuming it doesn't have to be anything you worked on necessarily, but
I worked on shows that failed.
But I mean, something that that has failed, whether you've worked on it or not, that you think possibly could have been a success with a different crew.
I'll do a limited version of that, which is that I think the final 2 seasons of Game of Thrones shouldn't have been garbage. And they did fail everyone. They failed the audience, and they failed the actors, and they failed because they had a wonderful, well-trained crew that had done almost a decade of these incredible shoots, right? And they had these incredible actors who really brought their souls to it. And then, the writing wasn't up to par. It was literally like there was 2 different shows. And, I went to college actually with David Benioff. He from everything I know of him, he's a very nice guy, a very dedicated guy. You know, whatever choices he and Mr. Weiss made weren't the right choices for the final seasons, and they've gotten a lot of criticism for those. And I think, you know, it's unfortunate because there were so many other ways to have ended. You don't have to have George R.R. Martin's exact vision, but, you know, you can do something that's similar to what you've done for the last 7 years, right? And so I think that's an example of something that shouldn't have gone the way it did.
Yeah. Do you think that's an example of some writers nowadays just not even, especially probably some up-and-comers who just don't really understand some of the fundamentals of writing, and once they didn't have that safety net of the books to feed off of, it kind of showed how little talent they really maybe had in the end? Or do you think it was just something that was just too overwhelming and they had too much to draw from and they were just too quickly a huge success, and too much power, too much, you know, ego, all that kind of stuff?
I mean, I think it's a combination of all those things, and it would be rude for me to say David Benioff and D.B. Weiss aren't good writers. I think they're good writers. I think that you know, George R. R. Martin had given them a wonderful, incredible foundation for everything, and so when his books were no longer there, you know, I think they didn't figure out how to make it work out past that. I will say broadly, one of the biggest problems in the industry, certainly in the time that I've been there, and I'm sure it's much before I came, is that there's a lot of people in power who aren't yet ready for that responsibility, who don't have the craft or the skills or the experience or whatever. You know, in the industry, you're often given, certainly in TV, you're often given responsibility for television because you have the right connections. You know, especially nowadays with all these distribution outlets. You know, you get a show. Before, it used to be 20 years ago when I started, I would like, I got this pilot, I'm ready to sell it. People were like, look, even if you sold it, you're not going to be the guy in charge. We're going to bring somebody who's done this for 20 years, and you're going to just be another writer in the room. Now it's like, you sell a show, you're 19 years old, you're 25 years old, you have no experience in this, and suddenly you have 10 people bidding on the show because there's so many now distribution outlets, and now you're the boss, and you're given 300-person crew, you know, and a $50 million budget. And, you know, a week ago you were in your parents' basement, you know, or you're working at Starbucks. And so you don't necessarily have the skills to make that quantum leap. And I've worked in situations where showrunners weren't trained yet. They hadn't had the journey, and they were given it because too early. And I think that's a consistent problem right now in the industry, is that a lot of people are being given this because they have the right connections, and they don't have the experience, and it's getting worse. But we're getting now a situation where the industry is losing money on it, and they're beginning to realize we need experienced people running these things. And that, I mean, that.
Yeah. And that's kind of some of the same things I'm hearing from the outside too. Aaron C sends in $5. Cameron, you see more productions moving out of California? Do you see more productions moving out of California? Seems like Vancouver and Toronto are getting a lot more work in recent years. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, we were moving for a long time production out of California. There was an effort to try to address that. I think the recent lockdowns, California has been particularly very strong on that. Have made it very difficult for filming to return here. So people now, the shows that are talking about starting up again, are looking at Canada, they're looking at Europe. But even within that, you know, there's a dispute right now going on in Vancouver, where I talk about how the unions are placing restrictions on how much testing and all this stuff, and how you can film. And the people of Vancouver, the unions of Vancouver said, you know, we don't want that level of restriction. We can't film. So they were openly rebelling. And so now you're having a situation where people are like, well, we can't film. The union's like, you can't film in Vancouver because they're being too lax on the restrictions we need to keep everyone safe. So now people are like, well, we'll move to Toronto. So it's now moving within countries as to how different environments are handling this lockdown. I mean, I think ultimately the economic pressures are going to keep filming out of California, which is unfortunate. I live in Santa Monica. I'd love to live here, but you know, I'll be honest with you. People are leaving LA. People are leaving California. I know screenwriters that are like, you know, I don't want to live here anymore in this kind of environment. Or I can't go out. I can't go to the bookstore. Again, publicly, they're like, we got to do what we got to do, right? And private, like, crap, man, I can't.
Yeah, I was just going to say, not to bring politics into it again, but I'm sure that's another driving factor is you have a lot of these people that are hiding behind this whole political business. Will it look hypocritical if they were to, like, say, let's just throw it out there, like Texas decides tomorrow, we're opening the state up. And, you know, if the production companies want to come here and film, come on in. That's tempting for Hollywood, but that would be against a lot of the political things that a lot of the people are standing for right now. And like you said, a lot of people are scared to speak up because they know they got to toe that political line. Do you think that might also be a factor as to why they're holding back yet on a lot of these productions?
I mean,
Not so much the fear as it is just the political part of it.
I personally believe that they're linked. I think the fear is linked to the politics is linked to the fear, and to pretend that politics isn't part of this is false. I mean, again,
fear leads to anger.
We're seeing that in global society.
That's all I could think about when you said that.
Yeah, and if fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. We're seeing that all around us, right? And so, God bless George Lucas for his vision. But so, yes, the politics of it is very real. And Georgia opened up early on.
Yeah, I was just going to say Georgia was the one I was actually going to use as an example.
And so you had people in Hollywood wanting to rush to Georgia, and at the same time they had to publicly condemn Georgia. Are you going to kill millions of people? That didn't happen, right? Thank God it didn't spread the way people were afraid it was going to spread in Georgia. And again, no one once none of these things happen the way they say.
Right.
No one talks about it again. But I'm like, why didn't? Whatever. Fine.
But it's kind of difficult to listen to somebody go, oh, you can't be doing this and that and working and all these other things when they're out there, protesting and everything within close. Yeah. So,
that's the most charged thing of all. And I got into trouble. I posted, on Facebook, I questioned the protest. I said the same people on my Facebook, a lot of Hollywood people were saying, oh my God, we got to go out and protest. And these were the same people that were saying you can't go out to the beach. You can't go out and protest the lockdown. You can't, but you can protest this, right? And I said, guys, if this is a consistent, we should all just stay home, right? Or we should all be out in public, make a choice. And I got really attacked, and people said, well, you're being really insensitive. And, I got a lot of DMs from people saying that's really inappropriate. You can't question Black Lives Matter. I'm like, hey man, you see this color? I have something to say as a minority in this town, as a Muslim guy. And I have something to say about being a minority. And so it is what it is. The hypocrisy is a real thing. It's because it's an echo chamber, and I don't care about it anymore because, as you see, I've talked on these things. I mean,
right, and I hate to bring it up, but it is such a big deal. It's gotten so, and like in my years growing up, I don't ever remember this being such a big deal. I mean, yeah, the Oscars and certain other places you've had actors and stuff go up there and say this and say that and protest this and protest that, but I just don't remember a point where the crazy had gotten so bad that we've gotten to this point where we're at right now, where even like to the detriment of their own business, it feels like at this point, Hollywood's just like, nope, we're going to stand by this. This is the hill we're going to die on, and the hypocrisy and the irony of it all. Yeah. It's just hilarious.
Well, I mean, I've said this because I'm not afraid to talk about politics. My politics are neither left nor right. As anyone who's heard me speak before, I'm pretty libertarian, so I have very unique views. But, this path we're on was set in motion the moment Trump was elected, right? And many of the choices that were made, many of the choices in Star Wars that were made were as a result of people in Hollywood seeing the election of Trump as, they literally saw it as the rise of Hitler. And I have my critiques of Trump, but he isn't that. And they saw it that way. And so they suddenly went to this mode of we've got to take control of all messaging and put out as much what they consider to be anti-Trump messaging, which became extreme left messaging, which I don't think the audience wants either, right? And that's what it's been for the last 2 or 3 years. And even though they don't believe any of the stuff that they're saying, they're like, well, we got to do this because we got to stop this force of history. I'm like, man, by going to an extreme leftist position where now people like, end capitalism, right? End the nuclear family, right? I mean, that nobody wants this crap. And if you're feeding this crap into entertainment, people are going to stop watching this.
And that's exactly it. Yeah.
You don't believe any of this. You're just saying it because you think that's what's going to beat Trump. I'm like, that's what's going to get
the right side of history. Yeah. That's another term I'm sick of hearing, the right side of history. It's like, how do you know? It's like, for one, we've gotten to this point. Yeah, I'm not going to get any deeper down this. Aaron C.
I've had this argument. I've had this argument recently with a friend of mine who's a very successful screenwriter who said, Trump will be out, and I believe history is, history. He's like a very Marxist. Like history will move forward to a progressive thing. I was like, history ain't progressive. History is a cycle. What are you talking about? Everything's happening now. It happened before. It's going to happen again. What are you talking about? History,
especially if we keep ignoring the past. Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't destroy the past, I'm like, you're just going to repeat the same crap over again. And whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah. Aaron C sends in a super chat here. Says $5. Cameron, you see more production. Oh, we already asked that
Yeah,
one.
run through this one.
The next one, there was another one. Super sticker from Christy. I'm sure it's poop, so it's a pooper sticker.
Thank you.
Knowing her. Roof Kareem, that's the one I wanted to get to next. With T. Louis 2 and TLJ, can you give your insight on subverting expectations and deconstructing heroes and storytelling trends that writers are using? This kind of goes right off of, I guess, the conversation we were just having in a way, as far as kind of like how the writers are kind of just pushed into this political corner and it's destroying, all these franchises we're in love with, basically. And yeah. Anyway, what's your take on this?
Well, and like I said, I've been doing this 19 years. What I watched is this phrase, subverting expectations. Again, it all started after Trump. I never heard this phrase before 2017. I never even heard it, right? Suddenly, I hear it all the time now. I heard it 2 days ago when I was pitching a show to an executive who I respected, but she was like, and we got to make sure we subvert expectations. I go, because, I find the term really offensive. As I got into filmmaking, I got into storytelling because I'm an audience member and I want to be entertained as much as I want to create. And the idea of subverting the audience's expectation is so deeply offensive to me. I mean, you should surprise people. I've said this before. As a good writer, you should surprise people. It shouldn't end the way the person thinks it's going to end, but it should fulfill them emotionally with an ending that they didn't see exactly coming that way, but it satisfied them emotionally. The idea of subverting expectations is actually aimed at subverting emotional satisfaction, in order to get some kind of message across. And that to me is deeply offensive as a storyteller. And it's also unproductive because if you don't fulfill your audience's emotional expectation, even if it's not plot expectation, then they're going to walk away, which is what happened with Disney Star Wars, which is what happened with all these things, with the Ghostbusters, reboot and this weird thing that they try to do with Terminator and all this stuff. You kill John Connor in the first minute. Yeah, that's subverting expectations. But I don't care about the rest of the movie now. I mean, you just killed John Connor, so you just undid Terminator 2, right?
Absolutely.
Terminator 2 is an incredible movie. It's still an incredible movie.
Yeah, and not only that's where I brought up the irony of they don't even understand their own message because they made Sarah Connor, one of the greatest mothers in cinema history, an absolute failure at that point.
Well, it's because there's an anti-family agenda in this as well.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of other things that they're not even, I don't even know if they're really even realizing it or if, like you're just saying.
They preach this crap to other people. All these people I see preaching, we've got to deconstruct the nuclear family, all have very attractive spouses and nice children going to private schools, right? We got to end capitalism from rich people that are never going to end capitalism. So it's like, why are you guys saying this crap? You don't believe it.
Yeah, and then the whole deconstructing thing, I think, like you said, has come about with, I mean, we see in a lot of it, even though, in recent years, it's gotten a cult following with kind of like Batman and Superman, but we've seen a lot of that with that at first. Like people were just like, it's too dark. It's too, deconstruction. We've seen it with Luke. We've seen it now with so many other characters, even though some people liked Into the Spider-Verse. We did see it a little bit with Peter Parker, even though he does get redeemed at the end. It's still this common trope.
Yeah,
it's still this common trope, and especially seems to just affect mainly white male characters. To be honest,
it is a conscious, not even unconscious agenda. It's a conscious agenda. The funny thing is, it's largely white males who are writing these stories. In some ways, it's a little bit of like, get the spotlight off of me, and I'll talk. And I'm just going to be the champion of this stuff. I mean, and as I've said on other podcasts, some of the most racist people I've come across in this town are people that are loudmouth progressive liberals who are the very caricature that they're talking about, right? And they're the ones writing a lot of these stories. You'll see, and that's why you see, what happened to Star Wars is you look at characters that had a lot of potential, like Finn, ultimately become this racist character by people who are proclaiming diversity and look, we got this Asian woman there, and it's like, why'd you get this Asian woman this bad character, right? I don't know if have you ever read the never filmed version of Episode 9, The Duel of the Fates?
Most of it, yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, I mean, you may have a different opinion. I loved it. I thought
it was really good. I mean, compared to what we got, anyway.
Yeah, compared to what we got. I mean, I thought, Colin Trevorrow. I have friends who know him very closely who work with him, and he's very much a real fan. And he was trying to get this franchise on track from the heart based on the restrictions that have been put on him. He's told, you can't have Luke Skywalker alive. Fine. He still made Luke as a Force ghost an active part of the story, right? In a very interesting way. And he did everything he could. And one of the amazing things about the script that we never saw is that Rose Tico was an incredible character. I think I might have frozen there. Rose Tico
yeah, but we can still hear you. You're good.
Rose Tico in Duel of Fates was an incredible character. I really loved her character. It's a character of someone who wasn't trying to, here's an Asian woman because I cared about diversity. There's like, here's a character. I want to make her interesting. And I'm going to give her all these adventures that really challenge her and make her very important to the story. That's what it was about. And Kyle Trevor had no need to prove that he wasn't a racist. So whenever someone needs to prove they're not a racist, that's always a red flag to me.
Well, and I mean, I don't know if you know any inside baseball on what went down as far as between him and the studio, but I know, and I don't know what you can say, but yeah, I agree with you 100%. Like that script felt like Star Wars. It not only, unlike JJ's version of the film, which calls attention to the fact that it is making fun of The Last Jedi and has that wink at the fans constantly.
It just went. I mean, he said, "Okay, well, I've been given The Last Jedi." He
worked with it, yeah.
I'm just going to go with it, and I'm not going to insult it. I'm just going to keep building and get it back on the track, and he did, right? And you're like,
yeah.
The Last Jedi, you're like, I'm good with this. If you don't like The Last Jedi, you're like, I'm good with this.
So then, it's the best what you can tell us. Then, so what happened then? As far as did they refuse to change things to where he could make it work in his script since Carrie had died, or was it something completely different?
From what I've heard, again, I know people who are working with him right now, so it's deep, intimate relationship, right? And so that's how I got the script without revealing. Gave it to me, someone who's in his inner circle said, "Hey, man, you want to take a look?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, I want to read this," right? And so that guy had gotten it from Trevorrow. So from what I've heard, is that Colin first he thought he could get them to get Luke Skywalker back, and they said no. Luke Skywalker is dead. My understanding is he did try to convince Kathleen Kennedy to just change the
even though they had a year to change it, yeah, and they could have, yeah.
I mean, all you had to do was you just had to edit him fading out. You just didn't have to do that, and he's still alive. Yeah. That's it, and you just go off him staring off at the sunset, and you're like, what's going to happen next? I would have gone with that, right? And so then they just chose, but they're like, no, he's dead because they got to get this white dude out, and so he's dead. So you say, fine, okay, he's dead. All right. Then he went back, and my understanding is he had written a script where Luke was alive, and they were like, "No, you can't use that. Get rid of that." Okay. Then he went back. All right, fine. I'll do a new version of the script where Luke is a Force ghost, and he's taunting Ben, and he's being an actual spiritual guide to Rey, which is we saw. He's very active in that script, and and Carrie Fisher, Leia was incredibly active in that story, and so of course, Leia, Carrie Fisher dies, so that creates a problem that ultimately, that what do you do now? But I think that Trevorrow, based on what I saw, could have figured out version 3 of that, right? He could have, because he loves the franchise. My understanding is he was trying to come up with a way to make it work, but they just decided you're out. You're out for 2 reasons. Again, this is what I'm hearing. I don't know Mr. Trevorrow. I hope to know him someday. I love his work. But what I heard were 2 reasons, which is that one is he challenged Kathleen Kennedy and Mr. Johnson, and they didn't like that. They didn't like that he would have the audacity to say you should change this thing, right? They thought that is very threatening. So number one, he was already on the crap list for them. And number 2 is that ultimately there's a factor. What Ms. Kennedy has been doing is that she keeps hiring these directors that are hot at the moment. So Colin had been hot, and then he had an independent film that didn't succeed and got bad reviews, and suddenly he's not hot anymore. And it was all about PR, like, I'm hiring the hottest directors. Oh, he got some bad reviews for a film, and he's been opposing me on this, and he actually seems to really like the old version of the franchise with George Lucas that I don't want to be associated with. Let's just get rid of this guy. And it was a combination of these things, and from what my friends tell me, he was heartbroken. But he was an absolute professional. He's never bad-mouthed it. He's never bad-mouthed anything that had to do with it. But what they tell me, he was heartbroken. He was shocked and heartbroken. He expected to be told, all right, after Carrie died, rewrite the script again without Carrie. You made it work without Mark, right? Now make it work without Carrie, or figure out a way to resolve it. And he wasn't given that opportunity, to my knowledge. Maybe he did write a script, but ultimately he was told, you're out, you're done. We're just going to go back to JJ. And he was hurt from what I told. And I think his team, I think he's a man of great dignity from what I hear, a man of great integrity. So he just said, fine, I'm going to be a professional. I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to say anything about this. I'm going to move on to other things, right? His team, his people around him were really upset at the way he was treated. And so my understanding is that's how that script got leaked, is that he just wanted to move on and put it behind him, move on to Jurassic World. And they said, no, man, you wrote a great script. And this would have been a better movie. And his team leaked it out. Whether he was approved it or not, I don't know. But I've heard his team put it out there because they were so offended at what had been done to his reputation unjustly.
Wow. Adam Wolford sends in $5. I've heard that Atlanta is pushing for more people to come start shooting, making movies there. Also, Georgia is cutting and giving tax cuts to anyone. I know Georgia was a state that's been trying before this to get a lot of productions in their state. I don't know if you can add to that at all, or
yeah, we talked about Georgia before. I mean, that's been the one. Tyler Perry, has got a studio out there, and so he was one of the very first people to come out and say we can film again. But he said, "Well, here's all the ways we're going to keep everybody safe." Right? I had that list, and he's a billionaire. He's a very successful guy, and the town was like, "Oh, thank God, we got somebody in power saying we can film again." That's what they were looking for, right? Somebody who was powerful, who had money and who's making stuff that's popular, whether you like it or not. It's very popular, and so my understanding is he is back in production. And they're working fine. And so Georgia is going to be a state where a lot of people are going to go. The problem is a lot of that got thrown up in the air because Atlanta just, burned down, again, right? I mean, all these horrible rioting and things like that and the violence in the streets, right? And so that doesn't make it great. But outside of the major city of Atlanta, much of Georgia is very peaceful and is filming. And so, yeah, I think a lot of it's going to go there. But again, when they go, everyone's just doing everything they can quietly so they don't get the you can't work lockdown nuts coming at them. So quietly going there, right? You can't work until we have a cure 10 years from now, right? Whatever. So
right. All right. Fat Steven Seagal beat up Ryan Johnson, sending Canadian $2. Says, somebody say Asian woman, because I fat ran here.
Well, and Kelly Marie Tran, who we all love, nobody harassed her to my knowledge in real life, right? She is a great actress. I would love to work with her. And I'm sorry that she got short shrifted in both Star Wars movies. And had Colin been able to make the movie he wanted to, we would have remembered her as one of the great heroes of the Star Wars franchise and one of the great actresses of the franchise. So it's a tragedy.
Yeah, and she's one of the reasons why we know at least the JJ cut exists, or the longer JJ cut exists, for sure anyway. Mr. Tickle Trunk, interesting name, says in a Canadian $10. Says, Cameron, make a channel yet? I need more of this man on my television. He's right. Disney made the new black character in Star Wars a comic relief janitor while Lando was a player, and that made me jealous. And then they had to turn him into Pando. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't, as an African-American man said to me a couple of years ago, he said, man, they're going to make these white dudes all sort of, feminized. And then the thing that frightens them the most, black male sexuality. They're going to get rid of us too. That's what they did. Lando, the seducer of women is a little threatening. Right. And that is actually one of the deepest forms of racism that I actually had a conversation.
Get him away from the white women.
That's one of the deepest forms of racism that exists in Hollywood. I had that conversation where I told somebody I was working with, he didn't want to hear it. I thought he was mistreating some of the African Americans on staff, and I had a conversation with him. He's like, "No, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist." I said, everyone in Hollywood says that, but I notice you never you only hire sort of these black women that you can dominate, but like a confident black man like a Denzel Washington, you ain't gonna hire that guy, right? He didn't like hearing that, but I had to say it to him, right? Because I didn't care anymore, right? So and so thank you. Yeah, I actually do have a channel. It's Kamran Pasha 72. I'll see if I can come into the chat and type it in there. How does this work? Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, I actually do. Okay. I'm gonna go in there into the chat thing and I'll type it. But if anyone my channel is very simple. It's just it's just some videos I've made, some short films. I haven't yet gone down this path that perhaps I should, but I'm trying to focus mostly on just creating new material for you guys, and hopefully I can post more things on there. But I like going on other people's channels. I enjoy talking to Tom and popping up here.
Yeah, we love having you on, of course, and hearing your insights and all your takes on Hollywood, and especially when it comes to Star Wars and stuff, which has kind of been, your, I guess to call it your claim to fame lately anyway. But it's one of those things that everybody is a fan of in this community, and it hurts to see this happen, just like I'm sure it hurts you.
I'm sitting on a few things that I can't talk about, which is frustrating for me because there's like stuff going on that I think would be very exciting to people in this particular community that has not been, I haven't signed the contracts yet, so I can't say the things that I want to say. But there's stuff going on that I hope in the very near future I can come back on and say, wow, I want to announce that I'm just involved in the show that you all know, and you're all like, wow, he's going to be a part of that show. So let me actually get that show. Let me get it. But there's stuff I'm working on, and I hope to be able to announce all of that on Midnight's Edge and other channels.
Cool. Yeah, I've been hearing some weird things about certain people in our community. I can't say much either. I can't say anything either, unfortunately, but I can tell you off air maybe. But
yeah, I always like gossip.
We have another question here. Let me get to it. Aaron C sent in another one. Says, with the pandemic, how do you see the situation with funding after all of this? You think these woke projects are still going to get funding, or are investors weary now?
It's a great question because they were already weary a year ago. I knew that Birds of Prey was going to fail because I knew they had figured out that all of those woke projects that we saw last year, whether it was Charlie's Angels or Terminator Dark Fate or whatever, they'd all been greenlit during the early excitement of, we got to get Trump out, and we got to make it strong women and fight for Latinos and all this, right? And whatever. So they all did all that. And it takes a few years to get a movie made. So there was a whole cycle of these woke movies that were put into production. And, starting with Ghostbusters reboot. And then they all came out in the last couple of years, and they were all terrible, and they all did badly. And so people, and the Star Wars and all did badly, and people began to realize this is the wrong thing that we set in motion a few years ago. We got to get off this track and onto a track that's actually going to make us money. And so they got into that place. And Birds of Prey, I knew was going to fail because the industry had already gotten to it, done with this woke crap. So they threw this out there, and they're like, Hail Mary, let's see if it works. It didn't. And so they were done. They were finished. And then even more than the pandemic and the lockdown, right, is then all the rioting and the social issues that erupted this summer exploded. And the industry's like, oh my God, now everyone is going, suddenly the official narrative has gone backwards to extreme left, right? It's gone backwards. And now everyone's already figured out the economic model of this extreme leftist, social progressivism, whatever stuff is not what the audience wants. They figured that out. That's not a profitable model. But now they're trapped because now they've got to go back to something they know doesn't work, and they know they're just kowtowing to an enraged mob, right? To a Twitter mob. That's why you see things like, it's embarrassing. The great actress like Zoe Saldana, if you saw, she came out just yesterday publicly shaming herself and apologizing for being involved, in a movie where she played a black woman, great singer, Adina Simone, who's just of a darker shade than she is, right? As a black woman, and it was like she had to apologize for not being black enough. Zoe Saldana, and everyone is saying this garbage just to get the mob off their back, and no one believes it. I don't really think Zoe Saldana in her heart feels this is right. I mean, God forbid, you forgive me, Zoe, if you're watching this and you feel I'm misrepresenting you. You certainly didn't need to say any of the things you said. Maybe you believe them. I don't know. But I certainly believe that people around her don't think that she needed to apologize, but they felt they had to for political purposes. And the only person that's fighting back right now is Gina Carano. That's it. And God bless her. She is fighting back and saying, I will not go down this fake path of, pretending to be somebody I'm not in order to make you guys get off my back. And they're attacking her, but she's standing her ground.
Yeah, and again, I'm kind of with you in that boat of, you can't speak for her, but I definitely don't feel like she should have had to apologize. I mean, this is just getting to ridiculous levels at this point.
Yeah, and it's going to be there, and people are being, like all these. I mean, people are being forced to quit jobs. I mean, you have all these voiceover actors who are good actors, or like, I can't play a black man anymore. I can't play a brown woman. My voice, and they're quitting jobs, and no one even realized. The audience didn't realize what their ethnicity was. They just followed the animated character, right? And so. I'm very much of the view as a filmmaker, especially if I'm doing, and I've done animation, if I'm doing, just voice work, I want the best unique voice for that character. I don't care about your skin tone or ethnicity, right? I mean, James Earl Jones is the best voice for Darth Vader, a white man, right? And so that's the guy that I would cast for his voice, even though he's not the ethnicity of the character. And that's me. And again, people are like, you can't say that. I'm like, well, I'm a minority. I'm a brown guy. I'm a Muslim. I'm going to say it, right? Because, and so, and I have fought on projects that I've worked on where you have your standard Muslim terrorist villain or whatever. And I'm like, you might actually want to cast an Arab actor for the role rather, than the Greek guy saying Allahu Akbar, right? So I fought for ethnic authenticity on screen. Certainly, I've done that. And I also know when it's not the right move. And so people just can't make those differentiations.
Yeah. All right, moving on. We got another question right on that one. Right after that one, Rivers727 sends in $5. So, how is Colin going to handle Jurassic World 3? Because Kennedy's husband, Frank Marshall, is still producing that film. Okay. That's a very good question.
Good question. I'll say this. I actually met Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy years ago, early in my career. I'm sure they don't remember me. I liked both of them. I even liked Kathleen Kennedy, and I don't agree with the choice she's made as the head of Lucasfilm, but I don't have a personal thing with her, and I like Frank Marshall a lot. They're very smart people. I will say this. This is what I've heard from my friends, is that this is her people who work directly with Colin Trevorrow, that essentially the day after Trevorrow was let go from Star Wars, that Frank Marshall reached out to him, essentially offered him, we'll come right back to Jurassic World. Frank Marshall was trying to rebuild that relationship. I think I'm not going to comment on their marriage or their dynamic, but I think Frank knew that Colin is a great talent, and then maybe it shouldn't played out that way for him. And he immediately said, get back into Jurassic World. And from everything I'm hearing, Frank gets along really, really well with Colin and just wants to be a mentor and a supporter to him. So it's positive in their relationship. And, again, Colin Trevorrow is a complete professional. I'm sure he doesn't sit around grumbling about Kathleen Kennedy, whatever he may feel in his heart. He's just moving on to his other opportunities, and he's not going to say, I'm not going to work with Frank Marshall because he's married to her. He's just building his career as he should.
I know what's up. I said that second movie sucked. We need our boy back. And not only that, I got a little bit of a boner when he stood up to the wife. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
No comment. No comment.
I had to pull out a little Frank there because, he's a mainstay over on Midnight's Edge After Dark. So I had to do that. All right. For all our Congo fans out there.
I liked Congo. I even read the book.
It's an ongoing thing over at Midnight's Edge After Dark. Drive-by commentator, which I love that name, sends in $10. Maybe decentralization is healthy for the film, music, and game production in the future. The less centrality, the less arrogant or greedy producers we have playing with house money. Well, that's an interesting take. What do you think about that?
I mean, like I said, I'm a libertarian, so I believe that decentralization is always the best thing to do, right? So I always think when power is too concentrated, it leads to abuse of power. It leads to what happened at Star Wars and in Lucasfilm, right? You leads to voices being cut out. It leads to being no way to address and fix problems. That's what happened to me on TRON, right? Because power is so concentrated, and there's you speak truth to power, you're out. So the problem is we're not heading towards decentralization. We're heading, especially with the new consent decree that's been invalidated today by the federal judge on movie studios being able to own theaters again. We're heading back to decentralization, and the empire rises again.
All right. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. CMD.
I want to respond to. There's someone in the chat I see that just made a personal thing. I want to respond because sure. I just want to read them out loud. There's someone in Passer Montanus. Thank you for posting this. He said, Cameron, concentration is a natural result of unbridled capitalism. How can you not see that? Hey, guess what? I can see that, right? That's why I believe in antitrust laws, right? I don't think Karl Marx is an intelligent or interesting person, but he was correct about one thing. Which is that capitalism, the very nature of competition, leads to its centralization because you're knocking out all the competition and the strongest wins, and it can lead to monopoly. He just didn't come up with any good solutions to that problem. And Andrew Carnegie, if you read back his Gospel of Wealth from the 1800s, he addressed that. He responded to Marx. So there's very intelligent responses to how to handle the monopoly situation, the dangers from within the capitalist point of view. So yes, so that's all I'm going to say about that. And no, I'll never be a communist. So on we go.
There you go. All right. CMDRP or PESIP or PESIP. I think it's all letters there. With CGI actors as Disney plans and database of movements, movie making can be cheap. Will this democratize movie making and destroy the industry? Well, before Cameron pops in on this, to make a CGI character costs a hell of a lot more than it does to just film an actual actor. Last I checked, but depending on what you're doing, I mean, if you're talking about stunts and stuff, oh yeah, you're going to use the CGI. But just to have it, still got to have an actor to do a voice. So there's still got to be an actor involved one way or the other. But yeah, go ahead, Cameron.
Well, I actually have a specific. What I'm seeing right now, I'm actually one of the projects that I wish I was able to talk about, but I'll tell you a little bit. It's a project I'm developing that's set in the world of Arabian Nights about Scheherazade as sort of Scheherazad's adventures, right? And and that's been a challenging project to get off the ground, doing all of the stuff that's happening. Because how do you film something in 9th century Baghdad, right, in this current environment? And one of the avenues we've been looking at is talking to a major special effects company that's come up with a new technology that is sort of the next stages past the 300, and Sin City of actually creating an animated background. And looking at the stuff that they've done, this is basically we can film a movie about the Arabian Nights with just a few people in a room, and the entire thing is green screen with this new technology, and it looks completely real. And I think a lot of that is coming, and that's less expensive than going to Baghdad and filming or recreating sets of that scale, right? And some of that technology, it's, the movie that just won the Korean movie that just won the Oscar, and I'm blanking on the great name.
Parasite.
Parasite. One of the things I was shocked to discover, Parasite had a lot of CGI in it. There were whole sequences where Parasite, where it was just these guys were walking around with green screens. You're like, but it's not a science fiction movie. It's just but they wanted to create these environments that they didn't have. And so they physically created rooms and buildings and things that weren't there, and you never noticed it. And so that's going to be what's happening. That's the next stage, is we're going to put actors into CGI environments that you won't be able to tell the difference.
Environments are a little different. Now, an actual actor or something like that, a character, that's a lot of work.
Yeah,
that's a little bit different.
I'm not a big believer in that. The great thing about this technology that we're exploring on Arabian Nights is that it essentially makes something look like a comic book coming alive, but it doesn't have that uncanny valley thing where the actor doesn't look real, because you have an actual actor and they're made to look like a comic book sort of, and made to look like that. But it's them, it's their eyes, and it's in the uncanny valley is when you look into something that doesn't have real eyes, you can feel that it doesn't have a soul.
Yeah.
So I think actors will all be central to it. And unlike George Lucas, I actually enjoy working with actors, and I think you can't get rid of them, and nor should you.
Yeah. Speaking of George Lucas, Mark C sends in a perfect follow-up there because he brings up Lucasfilm. With $5, he says, do you think Lucasfilm can be saved without burning it down first?
I think it's already in the process of being saved. From what I've said on Jeremy's channel, I have friends who know, and working with Jon Favreau, he's come in very aggressively. And I think, Ms. Kennedy's reign is essentially finished. I know you guys have reported on that a lot, and I followed your reporting, and it matches what I'm hearing from my friends in the Star Wars world, that essentially, she's still there, she's still kicking around, but her power is largely gone. And I think Mr. Favreau, working with Filoni and with Lucas, is putting Lucasfilm back on track. And I do think the one thing I think Bob Chapek is committed to is to fixing Star Wars. I mean, I think Iger couldn't do it because he would have to admit that he made a mistake, right? And that's
right.
The good thing that whenever there's a new regime, the new regime always wants to put their imprint on it. And in this case, that's a good thing, because Bob Chapek wants to show that he's not Bob Iger's toady, and that he's going to be the new leader. He wants to be the guy that people are writing biographies about, how Bob Chapek saved Disney, 20 years from now. And so he's going to want to fix Star Wars. That's all I'm hearing, is that he's like, we got to get this on track. And he knows he has no emotional commitment to anything that Iger did, because he didn't do it, right? And so for Iger to admit that he made a mistake in bringing Kathleen Kennedy, granted it was Lucas' mistake for appointing her, but not shutting down Kathleen Kennedy's vision early on, it's hard for Iger to admit that. Chapek's like, forget all that. I'm the new boss. I want people to remember me as the guy to save Star Wars, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's good for everybody then. I definitely agree with that. Diego Flores sends in one for Frank. Says, tell Frank I got a Laserdisc version and sent a picture to motivate Congo to Electric Boogaloo being filmed. Thank you so much. I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear that.
Yeah, the highly intelligent gorillas will party in this one.
They'll rise again. We're talking about having a mixed... Oh, well, Frank should really explain this. Yeah. This time we're going to have shark gorillas or gorilla sharks. I haven't decided yet, but they're going to be half gorilla, half shark. and man, are they dangerous as hell. It's like a velociraptor with big ass arms, and it talks because Amy's sad. Congo 2 coming soon.
God bless him.
God bless him. All right. I had to do that for him. Trevor RN sends in a Canadian $2. Cameron needs his own YouTube channel. He does. I tried to find it. I couldn't find it, sir.
Okay, well, it is there. If you do a search for my name, I have a short film that I did that I'm very proud of. I directed a short film called Miriam, Miriam. So if you just enter my name and enter Miriam into the YouTube search engine, it'll take you to that film. It'll take you to my page. There's not a lot. There's a couple of things there. I'm hoping to have more things on there.
I found it.
Found it. Okay.
All right. I thought this was it, but I wasn't 100% sure before. So, okay, I will share this out for you in the chat.
If we do anything with Kenzie Taylor, we're going to get that on there. God bless her.
All right. Yeah. I will share this out for you, and that way people can join your channel. There you go. Matt G has got the next question here. It says, before Last Jedi, what was the worst subverting expectations you had seen? Did anyone try this before during the golden age of movies, 1931 through 62, etc.? Well, that's an interesting question.
That is an interesting question. Look, I think the one that we're all familiar with was Last Jedi was so shocking to me that it hit me emotionally. It just wasn't. There's been bad writing throughout the history of Hollywood, right? There's been bad sequels. I mean, variety of Jaws sequels weren't that great, right? I mean, I would suggest that Alien 3 missed the mark, right? And in some ways subverted our expectations for that. I mean, that's an example of, I think once we went past Alien 1 and 2, that we went off into this La La Land, which we still haven't gotten off of, right? And, I hated Prometheus, viscerally hated it, right? And there, I thought it had, again, a very Hollywood anti-religion message, and it misunderstood a lot of things about the what made Alien work, right? By creating this weird mythology. So I think that's an example of efforts that were made to subvert what we experienced. In Alien 3, it starts off with, Newt, the beautiful little girl that we saved at the end of the second movie, right, is dead, right? Like, what? That subverted expectations. But at that point, you're like, well, I don't like this movie anymore. I don't want to be here.
It was like Dark Fate before Dark Fate, yeah.
And you're like, I want to watch this movie, and so and then she gets infected with it. It was whatever. It was like, why were you making these choices? I still have no answer for why. I have no answer for why.
That's a really great example, though.
Yeah, I have no answer for why that franchise went the way it did. There's no reason for it to be in this weirdo place where it's bad. I mean, the only good one that's been done was Alien versus Predator after Alien 2, and I like that. Right? I mean, it was a schlocky, fun movie, right? But at least that understood what Alien's about, which is a scary monster that you're trying to get away from. Right? That's what it's about. It's not about all this weirdo crap that they put in this franchise sunset, which has killed it.
Yeah, because usually, I mean, here's the thing: is it's become like a dirty word, like you were saying. Now the whole subversion, when you hear it, in a meeting, subvert my expectations. It's like, oh, you hear that now, you cringe.
Yeah.
But I mean, it never used to be such a bad thing. Even going back to this. The Sixth Sense had a great subversion of your expectations going into it.
Well, that's surprise. That's what I say. That's surprise. It's an emotionally fulfilling surprise.
Exactly.
So that's not subversion. Subversion has the very nature of subversion is to go in and to corrupt something. That's what the word means. That's why I don't like it. And so
that's a very good point. I was going to say, because I was also going to bring up the end of the original Planet of the Apes as well. But if you don't go in knowing the actual ending, then yeah.
But even then, that's not subversion, because
that's a good point. Yeah,
it's a message. What he says at the end is, "Damn it, you blew it up." I mean, this is coming at the height of the Cold War. Everyone's afraid of nuclear war, and here's the thing of what's going to happen if we're not careful. We're going to destroy ourselves, and the apes are going to replace us, right? And that was the necessary message, the emotionally fulfilling message of that movie. Right. And then afterwards, the next Planet of the Apes movie, at the end of that movie, if you remember, they blew up the planet. They destroyed the world. Right. That didn't work.
That was actually more of a subversion of expectations there. There you go.
Exactly. Because you're hoping now, you've just seen this shocking end. You're hoping now that the humanity can be saved by Charlton Heston. No, it gets worse. Well, that's not what I wanted to see. That is
right. Yeah, that's a very good point. And they did the same thing even with the third film, but I would argue that it worked out better for those films than it did for Star Wars, though, because they got another 2 or 3 movies that did pretty well. So,
anyway, time or whatever, it was all.
Yeah. Adam Wolford sent $5. Have you heard of the software where it listens to your voice and learns how to recreate it and start talking just like whoever it's mincing?
I mean, I've not heard of this. I'm not surprised. And what's going to be, and you know, what's going to be interesting with all of this technology?
I think he's mimicking, but yeah.
Yeah, with all this technology, including the visual things, where we're you know, is that it's going to be interesting on one level. Is you're going to be able to bring back Marilyn Monroe, which I don't think necessarily is a good idea, right? But I think it's going to be used for that kind of thing, and it's also going to be dangerous because I think in a world where there's so much disinformation, right? You know, I'm going to go to a very dark place for a second. We can get off of it. All the stuff that's happening with Epstein, what's all the stuff that's happening with the thing, you know, if people are like, well, they've got, you know, how the hell you pronounce her name, Ghislaine, you know, Maxwell, they've got her, you know, she's allegedly got the secret tapes of all these famous people, right? Well, let's say they release those tapes. How do you know it's real? Because with the new technology, you can recreate anything. So
the deep fake technology, yeah.
Deep fake technology, and now with the voice technology, right? So how do you know it's real? So at that point, truth vanishes as well. So that's the dark side of where this technology will take us. We won't know we'll never be able to know the truth if you can recreate entire events with fake.
Well, that's very true. We've seen it from both sides actually during the last elections years and all thing. You know, it's even every day you see something like, oh, somebody posts something. It's, you know, people believe it's real until somebody's like, wait a minute, something ain't right here, and they figure out it's fake. But
yeah, you see them both the right and the left, and you know, all of this leads us to what is true anymore. We're left with more ambiguity than we've ever had, which I don't necessarily, which, you know, there at the end of the day, you have to find the truth as you believe it. That's all we can do, but it creates social problems when people are rioting over things, and you know, and if some of the story that we've been told isn't true, that's a great way to manipulate human beings. And I think a lot of the events right now have a manipulation element to them.
Yeah, that's a very scary but good point. Diego sends in another 10 approving souls, I believe that is. Now, serious question for Cameron. Do you think that due to the beer bug, Hollywood will have to adapt being less political to survive, or are they going to burn and let other movie powerhouse rise? Now, you kind of answered this question a little bit different way, but he's asking it in a little bit different way. So I don't know if you could add a little bit different take to it.
I think they want to end the extreme leftist political content. I think they really do. It's not making them money. And the bean counters like this is, you know, everyone's Disney's people losing their jobs. It's real now, right? And people are out of work, and people have been out of work for months now. And the one thing they need to do is get everyone back to work, and they need to make money, or the whole industry collapses and everyone's out of a job, right? And yet they have to kowtow to this narrative. I think, God willing, after November, after the election, we'll be back on track. Whatever happens with the election, whoever wins, I think they'll feel like, okay, you know, Biden won, we got what we wanted, so now we can get off this crap, right? Or Trump won, damn it, Trump won. Fine. None of that effort to create all this drama got him out, so we got to deal with him again. So let's just get off the drama. Either way, I think that will give them the excuse to get off of this political thing because they know it's not going to make them money.
All right. And Mark C sends in another $5. Says, just so you both know, the day Kennedy leaves, Gary at Nerdrotic has promised me a party stream complete with Yub Nub music. I'll play you Yub Nub music that day as well. So there you go.
I love the Ewoks. Return of the Jedi remains my favorite movie. It's the first one I saw in the theater. I saw everything else on theater.
All right. I seen it in the theater, but I was too young to remember, so I don't remember it till video. Tiberius Monk sends in another 5, says, one property that brought back characters in a way that respected them while bringing new characters was Cobra Kai. Modern Star Wars, take note. Definitely. Yeah, we say that all the time. I don't know if you've seen Cobra Kai yet.
Yeah, and Cobra Kai is brilliant because you also get to see the adversary's point of view. We all grew up hating that guy, right? You know, and now you get to see him as this, you know, what happens to him and how he creates his rival, karate school. And so it's ultimately the Karate Kid was about those two boys, right? And their rivalry, right? And if you understand that's what it's about, you bring it forward into the present, and you got to keep it about that. And then you actually get complex because you see that even the bad guy is a complicated person. Is he really the bad guy, right? And so that's the way you do this kind of thing.
Absolutely. And next one we got from Jacob Browser. Says, TLJ hurt me so much that I haven't watched a Star Wars movie, OT prequel or sequel outside of 9 cents. Yeah, I haven't done a lot of Star Wars watching myself since then. I don't know about you, Cameron.
Yeah, I mean, and I use the same word. I was hurt. I couldn't sleep that night. I felt like something had struck me in the heart. I stayed up all night thinking about The Last Jedi, not in the ways that Mr. Johnson wanted me to, but in the ways of horror of where we were going, and my childhood being ruined by the very political forces I'd seen developing in Hollywood over my career, right? And I didn't watch Solo. I heard it's a perfectly fine movie. Some people like it, some people didn't like it, but I hear it didn't deserve to bomb on a creative level, but it did bomb. I didn't go see it because I was done with Last Jedi. I have not seen Episode 9. I don't plan to go see Episode 9, right? I haven't honestly looked at Star Wars like you, Jacob, since then, and it breaks my heart because it's because of Star Wars that I'm a filmmaker today. I spent my childhood creating movie ideas and stories with my Luke Skywalker action figures. That's what I do now professionally, and
Right.
I don't go back to the franchise anymore because it's, for me it's done, and I just want to remember my childhood, and this bad fan fiction, I'm just going to erase it from my memory.
Yeah, I did a editorial kind of comparing it to a breakup when it happened. So it was kind of like poignant in that way to me. And, I mean, there's this, dude, it's just a movie. It is just a movie to some people, but you know what? Star Wars, Star Trek, all these franchises, they mean a lot to some people in a sense that, there's people that I've heard stories, all kinds of stories about these franchises where they've gotten people through all kinds of sicknesses, cancers, you name it, the death of children. I mean, all kinds of just shitty shit that just because it may be a movie to you, it means a lot to certain people, and to see something like that happen.
That's the attitude. It's just a movie that was behind what was done in the Disney trilogy. It was the attitude of the people in Lucasfilm that it's just a movie and we can recreate the mythology for our political identity. It's great. It's just a movie for you. Good for you. It's not just a movie for me. I've had a very difficult childhood. I had a broken family. I had a lot of poverty as a kid, and it got me through. The way that I imagined a better life for myself, because I couldn't imagine it in the life. I couldn't ever imagine being where I am today, or I couldn't even imagine getting out of that environment that I was in my family at the time. I couldn't imagine it. And so the only imagination I had was I would imagine myself as Luke Skywalker going on these other adventures that I created for myself with those toys. And so it's not just a movie to me. That's why I couldn't sleep that night, because it saved me psychologically and physically as a child, and kept me alive to get through where I am. So that's why I take it very deeply what they did. I took it as a personal attack on my soul. That's wonderful for you. It doesn't affect my reality. My reality is it's almost like, I'm a religious guy. It's almost like a religion to me. And that attack was very deep, and I haven't forgiven it.
Yeah, and it is to a lot of people. And, and I get it. To some people, movies are just movies. That's great. But maybe you can relate in a way through music or literature or paintings. Take that into consideration, perhaps. But yeah, no, I definitely, I don't like that kind of an argument, but it is a fair argument in a way from certain people's point of view. But again, you got to take into consideration all the things we just said as well, I think. Donnie Pearson has a real good question here. Speaking of Star Trek, are you a Star Trek fan, Cameron?
I'm a huge Star Trek fan of real Star Trek. I gave up on this version. I actually didn't mind J.J. Abrams' new Star Trek. I thought it was
at this point, I'd rather go back to it.
Yeah. Then after, and then sequel, I was like, what the hell's happening here? It started off with, why is the Enterprise underwater? I'm like, well, where's this going, right? And then it just went off in this madness that made no sense to me. And then
if it makes you feel any better, Into Darkness is no longer a low point for Star Trek.
Yeah,
they wanted to know if you've seen Lower Decks.
I have former coworkers that I've worked with who are now working on the Star Trek shows, right? So I don't want to critique those shows. I haven't watched them because I gave up on Star Trek after that, right? I don't agree with Mr. Kurtzman's vision. I will say this. He used to be partnered with Robert Orci, right? They were Orci and Kurtzman were partners, right? And they're no longer partners. And Mr. Kurtzman has gone on to a lot more fame and success. Mr. Orci is still very much in the game. I don't know him personally. Again, all these people I don't know personally, but my friends know them very well. And said to me, Orci is like us. He's a traditional fan of both Star Wars and Star Trek, and he wouldn't have made the choices that have been made in this, had he been involved. But he's not involved. He's off doing his own thing. And he's like, yeah, it's not what I would have done with it. I would have done more of the satisfying traditional vision that many of us have.
Yeah, well, the rumor we heard was his third script for the third film was too Star Trek-y. So that's why they passed on it. I don't know if you heard that.
It's exactly what my mutual friend said to me, that he's a very deep fan, much like Colin Trevorrow, and that's not what the power structure has wanted for the last few years.
Which is funny because that's another thing I've heard is the first thing you don't want to tell them if you're going in for a job at, say, Star Wars or Star Trek is that you're a fan.
Yeah, you want to talk about the social justice things that are important to you and how you want to change society, right? That's what you want to talk about.
Yeah. Here's a good question here. Speaking of rumors and things coming from Midnight's Edge, what do you think of the 25% rumor, the 25% difference that we presented?
Is that the difference in versions of
because of the license? Yeah.
Okay, help me understand what exactly, because I want to understand what exactly.
Okay, what happened was when there was the split in 2005.
Yeah.
And most of this has been confirmed for the most part. But basically, the way they did it was Paramount licensed Star Trek through CBS for Bad Robot to make them movies. And they could use whatever they wanted and license it from CBS and do whatever they wanted from the old Trek stuff. But if they wanted to be able to do any kind of merchandising, it had to be at least 25% different. And overall, it had to be at least 25% different to differentiate itself from the original Trek. And one way they found a way around that was the whole time travel business and changing the timeline. Well, but that's the other thing. Yeah, is the merchandising is a big part of it from what we heard.
Yeah, I mean, I can believe that. I don't have privy to those economics. I heard something similar. There was something similar about how there was some kind of merchandising agreement with Lucas, with George Lucas, about using his original characters, and that impacted the choices made. That's also possible. These are all possible because Hollywood makes deals like these, right? And so I do believe that that's very realistic possibility. But even, ultimately, even with an economic restriction like that, it doesn't mean you go to bad storytelling, right? I mean, it doesn't mean you go
absolutely, to
authentic storytelling. You can create new characters. You can alter the direction of where everyone's going without altering the feeling of the world. That's where the mistake is.
Right. And as Donnie points out, yeah, now it is owned 100% by Viacom, but you got Secret Hideout is still involved. Yeah. There's still contracts that have to be honored. So that's why Kurtzman's still hanging around.
It makes sense. Look, I've been through this. I mean, I've witnessed on shows I've worked on where everyone's like, we got to get rid of this person, right? But they have a deep contract. You're like, okay, do we just pay them out? Do we let them stay here and cause more damage? And you got to figure out the economics of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've been hearing too. Tiberius Monk, also is another one, says Star Trek saved his life, prevented him from going to a dark place in life where otherwise would not be alive. So I know how you feel. And yeah, and that's I've heard that similar story, Tiberius Monk, from you don't know how many people from through the chats at Star Trek Las Vegas last year, just everyday conversations, when somebody sees a t-shirt I'm wearing or something like that just is like, oh, I love that. And then they'll just tell me like, oh, my grandma was passing away or she just passed away. And, this was the only thing that got me through those days. Though I've heard that story, sentiment, however you want to put it, so many times that when somebody says, oh, it's just a movie, it does kind of bother me for sure.
Yeah. I mean, for those of us for whom it is more than a movie, it is very troubling. And goes for you, for all of you for whom it is just a movie, whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek or anything else, great. But then don't take that away from us. There's no need to share with us, try to denigrate our feelings for it. You don't care about this franchise on a deep emotional level. Wonderful. There's no reason to then share that with us because you're essentially proselytizing that we should stop caring. It's like asking someone to convert to another religion. It's always offensive.
Yeah. Maverick Christian, speaking of religions, says the best new Star Trek is the Orville. Agreed? I think we can agree on that. I don't know if you've seen the Orville yet.
I have not seen the Orville. From everything I've heard from people that watch it, is that it is very much in the vein of the original show. And there's a lot of rumors as to whether it's been canceled. I tried to look into those rumors. I've not been able to confirm that. I think you've been reporting that probably hasn't been canceled. I can't contradict that. I actually asked my agents, do you know what's happening? And they had not heard that it was canceled, and they have not yet responded to me as to whether it is. So I'm assuming that Midnight's Edge reporting is correct.
Yeah, and I mean, really, Tom Constantino just came right out and said that's not true, and he's a producer on the show. So between that and everything else, I don't. Yeah,
but things are delayed. There's probably stuff happening. I mean,
yeah,
these rumors don't come out of nowhere. I mean, yes, right. There are rivals trying to create dramas. Yes, but something's happening internally. There's some kind of internal change happening. Maybe there's delays that are beyond what the virus lockdown situation has created. Internal dynamics. That's always possible. It's all politics in this kind of world. So.
Yeah, and the guy, whoever it was that put out the rumor, I can't remember if it was, I think it was a girl or a guy, I can't remember which, sorry. I'm not trying to, whatever here. It's just, I don't remember offhand. Whoever it was, I know they got called out in the tweets and they couldn't back any of their shit up and they even had to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
And even had the audacity to call out Tom Constantino's attachment to the show. So I was like, you don't obviously know who you're talking about here. So anyway,
it was like, if anyone follows my Twitter feed, I have very strong opinions about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation. I'm very pro Johnny. I've heard for years he's a very good man in a bad situation. And I've heard the opposite about Ms. Heard. And I recently got into an argument with somebody on Twitter and about, Amber Heard was accused by her former assistant of stealing a horrible story that had happened to this rape. And she stole that story and said, Johnny did this to me. And she was accused in court of that. And someone who was arguing with me was like, well, as far as I know, Amber's never had an assistant. I'm like, so basically you just don't know the facts, right? Amber has an assistant right now, and this was her former assistant. And so I love how people argue with you about basic facts. It's like, okay, just be quiet now. You don't even know history. You don't know facts.
Not only that, these people are so famous, their assistants have assistants. I mean, come on.
It's like, oh, she doesn't have an assistant. I'm like, here's a photo of her assistant standing next to her at the trial. I mean, don't you know what's going on? Whatever.
It's like, come on. Yeah, I've dealt with enough handlers and assistants. It's like...
Yeah, but that's where we are with social media morons, right? I mean, I get into debates with these idiots, and I'm like, what am I wasting my time for? You don't even know what's happening.
I hate to make it sound like there's people that are just that ignorant out there, but again, I can see from outside looking in how you could think it's one way or the other, but seriously, the show Entourage is not far off. These people, when they get to a point, they have a dozen people around them all the time. It's a handler, an assistant, a manager, an agent.
Assistant to a famous person is a mini celebrity, and then they have to have people that keep the hoi polloi away from them, right? So yeah, it's fascinating.
So each individual celebrity is like an entourage in themselves, is my whole point. So it's like, yeah. So for anybody to think that is just kind of ignorant.
Yeah, but that's where we are in the modern world. A lot of not correct information being flowing out there.
I mean, it's getting to the point where I almost need a fucking assistant, and I ain't even close to being a celebrity. And Gary, I know, poor him. He's just sitting there like, he just finally hired a producer for Friday Night Tights, but it's like, man, he needs like 2 assistants probably.
That's a credit to what you guys have created with this channel, that you're that busy, and you have such a large viewer base that you're expanding, and that's a blessing.
Yeah, that's part of it, but the other part is just the busy part, definitely, for sure.
We all have money beyond this, right? So yeah.
But no, so that's one aspect of Hollywood I don't think a lot of people really, and again, that speaks to the whole bubble aspect and how a lot of them are just in this kind of disconnected bubble where even the politicalness may not even be so much a necessity to keep a job or what have you, is just so much as they're like I said to Bree, and I'm not making any excuses for her. I can see where somebody like Bree would think there is such a thing as white privilege when her entire life has been nothing but white privilege. She's had everything literally handed to her. Yeah.
I mean, again, what it is the privilege of an inner circle of wealthy people, right? And so you can add race onto that, but that's the privilege of it, of being part of an elite, right? And then you can add guilt to that, and you can add an intentional disassociation so that the guillotine doesn't come from you. Now, that's what a lot of this is about, is that, look, I'm out there fighting against white privilege.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to an unfortunate place. As many of my African-American friends have said, a lot of the people we're seeing in the BLM movement who are out there rioting are all white people. These white kids, like, man, why are you doing this? Black people ain't doing this. Why are you doing this, right? And so it's that whole disassociation thing going on.
Yeah, and the whole Antifa business and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just funny how the people who are preaching to us about white guilt and white privilege are ones who've had it their whole lives. And it's like, you've never seen what it's like in the real world. In the real world, homelessness don't give a shit what color your skin is. You know what I mean? It's like hunger doesn't care what color your skin is,
It's because I work around a lot of these people who are incredibly wealthy. I mean, we're talk about hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. You work with them, right? And
exactly, yeah.
And they are often the loudest about this woke stuff. It said they don't actually live the woke thing that they're telling everyone else to do, but there's a deeper subconscious reason for that. aside from guilt and trying to disassociate, they like these. There's a lot of bad ideas out there on the extreme left, right? And they promote them because what it's going to do is it actually keeps them in charge. Because I got all these people out there, following these bad woke ideologies and ruining their lives, and the differential between the wealthy and the average person becomes greater and greater, and they like it that way. They'll never admit it, even to themselves, maybe. But I'm seeing it with my own eyes, and that whatever they're promoting keeps them in power and keeps people that they see as a threat further and further away.
No, and that's a great point, because I mean, not to bring Brie up again as an example, but I guarantee you, I'm willing to put money on, she'll sit here and virtue signal all day long on whatever it is. But if somebody said, well, right to her face, well, would you give up your part so a black actress could take over instead? You'd get a bunch of, well, I got to be on this platform. And
we're going to, Monica Rambeau, we've got all these plans for her. And it was like, yeah.
And I got to use my platform. If I give up my platform, then just a bunch of excuses as to why she shouldn't, and that's what we hear from a lot of these people. Because people that we're accessible to enough that will say these kind of things. That's the kind of questions we'll ask them. Well, what would happen if somebody said you should give your role up to a black person or to a Hispanic person? Where, I can't give up my platform to do that. It's my job to be up here to speak and use my platform, and all that kind of crap.
Everyone will lose if I don't do this. Yeah. Look, and I've said this on Jeremy's channel. I'll say this here. Now, I've worked on several TV shows where we had, this sort of fake affirmative action thing where, they bring on the African-American assistant, right, to fulfill the diversity quota. And then they treat that person with tremendous disrespect. Right. And I've witnessed that. I've witnessed that now on several shows. On a recent show I worked on, the black diversity hire was framed for something one of the white people did and then got fired. And everyone, all these liberal white people in the room were on the aggrieved white person side who had framed her. Right. And it broke my heart because I was like, that's when I had that conversation with that gentleman. I said, you guys realize, you're all you people talking about Obama, and you're all a bunch of racists. Look what you just did here. Right. They didn't want to hear it. I was like, I actually got that African-American woman a new job on a Netflix show because I knew she had been mistreated. But that was the thing. They bring them on, they disrespect them because they need to know their place, right? They're there as a token, and they need to know their place so that you don't outshine the person, in charge. And being the sort of, crazy, unstable dude that I am, I always call it out.
Yeah, like Oprah speaking out, like she has the gall to talk about privilege. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not saying Oprah's never faced any kind of racism in her life, but she's been one of the richest women in the world since she was like 30. So she probably hasn't faced any kind of natural racism since then. So I guarantee you she has no clue what the hell she's talking about. Well, maybe she seen some racism when she went to Africa or South Africa or something like that. She's seen it. But I doubt she's ever experienced it in the last 2 decades, 3 decades.
This is what I can tell you. This is a rule that transcends race, religion, or culture. Rich people, everyone kisses their butt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very simple. It's like Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes was mentally ill. Nobody confronted him and said, hey, man, you need psychiatric
George
help.
Lucas, look at this prequels. Just watch the making of that. There you go.
Nobody, as someone once said, rich people are never crazy. They're just eccentric. I think that was John Cleese in The Fish Called Wanda, which is a great movie, right? And he said, I'm not crazy, I'm rich, I'm eccentric, right? And everyone means eccentric, you do whatever you got to do, boss, just keep paying me money, right? That's what eccentric means. Crazy means take them away and get them help, right?
Yeah, they don't have any money left.
Yeah.
But then Mark C followed up with a super chat here and says, when Oprah Winfrey, one of the richest people in the world, complains about white privilege, we've entered clown town. Again, I agree. And I brought this up before. I'm not saying that, and being a white person, I cannot sit here and pretend that I've faced any kind of racism whatsoever, really, in my daily life until recent years when it's been blatantly obvious that there's this anti-white, especially cis male sentiment going around. So I do feel it now compared to what I ever did before. And because of that, I can say this with all I know this with all confidence. If racism was really as bad as the media and everybody else wants you to believe it is, then Buddy Holly would be the one who invented rock and roll, not you know, not any of the guys that are credited for it, like Little Richard,
rock and roll,
Chuck Berry, and those guys.
Yeah.
And then you get into the 70s and 80s and stuff. Look at like guys like Michael Jackson would have been the biggest performer in the world, not just the country, but the world.
And as someone pointed out, for a country with systemic racism, we just had a black president for 8 years. You got reelected.
Yeah, I brought this up several times. Yeah.
So, I mean, again, but we're not looking at the past. There's the way that these woke weirdos live in. It's only this moment. There is no past, right? That's why they go back and you have all these people say, you had Brie Larson saying, how she's proud to be the first female superhero. I'm like, Wonder Woman would like to talk to you, right? Lindsay Wagner, Bionic Woman would like to talk to you, right? Go back to the 1960s and the Avengers. Emma Poole would like to talk to you, right? And so it's just they live in this moment.
Yep.
This generation, I'm going to say this generation that we're living in right now is a very privileged generation that has the product of multiple centuries of human struggle to get to a place of privilege that they're in now. And because they're so privileged, they don't have anything that they can claim, is theirs that they've done. So they have to steal it from the past generations. And the only way to do that is forget the past generations, right? So they're the ones fighting racism for the first time in history. They're the ones fighting sexism that's why you're having all these.
They're the first ones who did Ghostbusters. They're the first ones who did Star Wars. Oh, I get it. Yeah.
They got nothing because they haven't struggled. Guess what? They've created a world we're all going to struggle now for another generation. And then a new generation will come and build something from the chaos that they've created. They got rich.
Yeah, I totally agree. And speaking of Oprah, I'll just say this.
Yes.
There's like how many black people in America? Roughly what?
So it's about 15% of 15% of the population is about 30, 40 million, probably at least.
Okay, and how many million does Oprah have?
Yeah, Jesus, at least 2.6 billion, right? So yeah.
Well, Oprah, you want to put your money where your mouth is? Why don't you give it to all the black people in America? There you go. Black people in America. She got enough and she'll have some left over. She can give everybody some money, especially if you're going by their math. She could give everybody a couple $1 million according to their math. So,
So I'm going to apologize to you. I actually have to go in a few minutes. If there's any.
Yeah, we're going to wrap this up anyway. So, yeah.
And apologize, everyone. I got
No. We got a couple more super chats we'll get through real quick here. The most vocal proponents of any movement are often exactly what they're publicly against. We had fundamentalist, anti-gay conservative preachers caught with male prostitutes, but today it's the left instead. It's human nature. Yeah, that's kind of what I was just saying. Like, yeah, I mean, until they actually have to do something about it. Mark C says Mash's Klinger was so far ahead of his time. He tried to get out of the military. Now we have to do it to get a job.
And here's something most people don't realize. Klinger's, from my point of view, was really ahead of his time. Klinger was Arab American. Klinger was a Lebanese character. Most people don't realize that. That's one of the first Arab characters in Western television, right? So they don't focus on it, but that's what he was.
And a cross-dresser at that. So
it's something. Here we go. Look. It's like no one's ever cross-dressed. Have you ever?
They're the first that ever done it. Nobody's ever done it before now.
Okay. Yeah.
Never ever. Nobody's ever been gay before now. Nobody's ever been black before now. It's only been white people before now. You haven't been around for the last 40 years, by the way, Cameron. You just came into existence in the last 5.
Yeah, I mean, the moment they find out what I think like, I become the adversary because I'm very dangerous. Because anyone who is a person of color, which is the phrase we use nowadays, who doesn't go along with the agenda. Yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean, it's like, what does that mean? I mean, a person of color. So I mean, it's whatever. It's gone full circle. First, it was racist to say colored. Now it's not racist to say person of color. It's just whatever. The term.
It's just a reverse. Yeah.
It changes every week. That's fine. I mean, now it's like instead of POC, it's now a BIPOC. I haven't bought into that one yet, but they will eventually get to that. Whatever. So, but that's the thing is people like us who are speaking out, saying this actually isn't common sense and it's not reflecting our experience as human beings. Are a threat because they take away the entire legitimacy of the woke movement, which is allegedly speaking on our behalf.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Cameron. And of course, we'll definitely have you back again. And I'm sure we'll try to have you on some panels as well. Because you got some great insight.
Kenzie Taylor. I keep missing her.
Kenzie Taylor. Rob, that's his department. I can't speak to that. So you'll have to talk to him on that one. And I don't even know where he's at. He should have showed up today, but that's all right. We had plenty to talk about. And Andre, sorry he didn't make it either. He sends his best wishes, of
Well,
course.
I have an MBA. I'm former, Wall Street lawyer. So I know
Mecca's here,
finance guy. We had a lot of interesting things. So yeah.
Mecca just showed up in the chat here a little bit ago, so she's around. And we also have Lorraine in the chat from Toxic Femininity as well.
Is here and a lot of my fan, friends and fans and all this stuff. And so God bless all of you. Great to see you. I'm sorry that I'm saying hello to all of you as I'm winding down.
But yeah, I mean, it's always fun to talk to you. I know, like I said, this isn't the first time we've got to talk to you, but it's the first time we've had you on here one-on-one, and it's been very insightful. And there's probably a dozen more questions I'd love to ask you, but you got to go. It's getting long in the tooth here anyway. I want to thank everybody out there for the super chats, for the great questions, for popping in and listening. We have over 500 people watching. Hit that like button. Be sure to check out Kamran's channel. I'm going to put that link right in the chat again here so everybody can check that out. Check him out on Twitter, right? You got a Twitter as well. I think that link.
I sometimes lock it up just to keep the crazies out of my thing, but just send me a request, and if I see that you're not a crazy, I'll accept.
There you go. That's kind of the way I am. If you put in your bio what your sexual preference is and all that kind of crap, chances are I'm not going to follow you.
Yeah, I'm like,
we don't seem to have that problem.
What's your gender pronoun? I'm like, you know what? Don't even worry about it. Let's just get to it, okay? Let's not even go there.
But otherwise, is there anything else you want to plug real quick, or any projects or anything?
I actually want to be able to. Hopefully, I'll be able to talk about projects I'm doing in the near future. I've got. So if anyone goes to my website, KamranPasha.com. I've got a couple of novels published, historical epic novels about the Middle East that I hope you like. You can buy them there. And, I've got a few shows in development. I mentioned the Arabian Nights show. I've got a project set in the Ottoman Empire that I'm working on. And, another project set in Moorish Spain. I hope to be able to give, thank God, there's actually a lot happening on all of them, but I can't actually talk about them yet because they're actually thankfully in a place of contracts and studios and legal stuff. So once we're in a place where we can talk about them, I want to be able to share those things because hopefully I'm going to have some new shows and things to share with you that I hope you can all tune into.
All right. And again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to us talk about all the industry business going on and Disney and all that good stuff. And I want to thank Kamran, of course, for his time as well. Have a good one, everybody, and take care of yourself.